Hey guys, Pat Guy Rules here, and welcome to a Spongy Bits rant. A lot of people were confused as to why I put Whale of a Birthday as number 2 on my worst episodes of Season 4 list. To find out why, let's see what I said initially. Episode 71A, Whale of a Birthday. Mr. Krabs ruins Pearl's birthday by being cheap. It's one thing if you're a parent and you can't afford to give your kid a birthday party, but the fact that Mr. Krabs has all of that money and he refuses to get her even a cake is just really sad and comes off as just almost child abuse here. The episode isn't even funny. They try to make these jokes about Mr. Krabs being cheap to Pearl, but it comes off as just really hurtful and flat and just mean-spirited in every possible way. This episode is terrible. It is clearly a
SpongeBob episode.
The only thing I like about it are the boys who cry. And no, I don't mean Squidward's performance, because that was creepy. And why does Squidward even like boys who cry? Doesn't he like classical music? Why would he like a cheap boy band? Ugh, this episode just is frustrating. And no, SpongeBob buying a bunch of gifts for Pearl does not redeem Mr. Krabs, because SpongeBob did it without Mr. Krabs' consent. And I'm pretty sure after the episode ended, Mr. Krabs is gonna go ahead and take all of that back. I don't care how sweet that moment looked at the end. Being a terrible parent like that cannot be redeemed by the actions of your employee. Ugh. Although, I guess it kinda clears up that, yes, Pearl is a biological daughter of Mr. Krabs because he had that "It's a Boy" banner since she was born. Ooh, wow. I regret this review. I really do. My opinion hasn't changed on any of this stuff, but the way I went about talking about this episode was completely wrong. Mostly because there's a lot of people in the SpongeBob and cartoon reviewing community that like to throw around terms like mean-spirited and child abuse. And also, these terms are misused and blown way out of proportion, so much so that I really can't use these terms anymore or take it seriously when anyone else does. Besides, it's way more productive for me to explain actually why I think something is mean-spirited rather than just say it is mean-spirited. No, this episode is clearly not actually child abuse. And no, I don't think this episode is anywhere near close to how horrible real-life child abuse is. But, in the context of this story, Mr. Krabs seems very callous and uncaring towards his own daughter. He doesn't know it's her birthday, he doesn't know how old she is, and he really only cares about making her happy so that she'll have a good social life and therefore go to college and not mooch off of him forever. It's like the writers just cannot give Mr. Krabs a motivation that doesn't somehow relate back to money. It couldn't just be about making his daughter happy. No, it has to be about the money. In an episode like The Chaperone, which you know I'm not very crazy about, at least you get the impression that Mr. Krabs does genuinely care about Pearl and wants what's best for her. In this, he really doesn't. And it's especially jarring if you compare it to something like Krusty Love, where his love for Mrs. Puff was enough to override his love of money. And although the episode would happen after this, we find out that Mr. Krabs' backstory is that when he was growing up, his family was incredibly poor and his mom couldn't afford anything for him. Knowing that makes this a lot sadder. Mr. Krabs has the money to spend, he just doesn't want to. A lot of people disagree with me on this episode, and I understand. My problem with it is a story-based one, and if you find this episode funny, that might just be enough for you to not care as much about the story problems. Similarly to how I feel about Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4 and I'm With Stupid. And to the episode's credit, I do think there are some funny things in here, like Mr. Krabs' line about wanting to get Pearl nothing. In context, it's pretty horrible, but as a play on words, it works. And I can see how a lot of people would find Squidward's performance to be humorous. And speaking of Squidward, this is a total betrayal of his character. There is no way that Squidward, in character, would ever admit to liking a boy band. Boy bands are the exact opposite of art and culture. You know what would make sense though? If Squidward secretly liked them and was incredibly embarrassed by this. Have the scene play out like this. Mr. Krabs goes over to Squidward and says, "Hey Squidward, you know anything about this band?" Squidward's like, "Boys who cry, I don't know anything. And Mr. Krabs is like, oh really? And then he plays the song, and Squidward busts out and does the embarrassing dance routine he does in the episode. And then afterwards his face goes all red and he runs away embarrassed. That fits a lot more with his character. Even though he denies it, he has consistently liked these quote-unquote immature things. But of course he's too proud to admit that, so he'd rather hide it, usually ending with Squidward giving in to his own temptations. That's what really bugs me about that, is that there was a simple way to have fixed this problem so that you still have the sequence pretty much intact, but still make it fit within Squidward's character. It's just kinda lazy writing to have this stick in the mud do something stupid and wacky just for a quick laugh. And as far as SpongeBob's involvement in the whole thing, the credit card plot is something I've seen before. That is a stock plot. Rocko's Modern Life did it a lot better. And it's not like this episode brings any unusual or interesting twist to it, it's just pretty straightforward. SpongeBob doesn't know how a credit card works, so he buys a bunch of stuff. It's not horrible by any means, but it's not interesting enough that it's gonna bring up this episode. In terms of the ending, I do still think that it just doesn't work. SpongeBob was the one that gave Pearl everything she wanted. It's not like Mr. Krabs did squat to indicate that he cares or he wants to make it up to her. And it's not like an episode like Jellyfish Hunter or No Hat for Pat, where Mr. Krabs is this evil villain that gets his comeuppance in the end. Yes, this ending is payback for the things he did, technically, but he's not this fun, over-the-top villain. He's just kind of a petty tightwad who won't even budge an inch to make his daughter happy. That's not fun and wacky and an interesting and memorable villain appearance. That's, in my opinion, just kind of sad. And that's what gets me. This episode is really just everything I hate about Mr. Krabs' character. The fact that he has become so static that they can't do anything that doesn't relate back to money. Because it's not the fact that Mr. Krabs won't spend any money on Pearl, it's that he's not even really trying. His efforts seem lazy. It's not like he put together this great party with limited materials. It's not like he worked really hard at it to try and make this work even without spending any money. It just feels like he doesn't care. And that's also why I find the ending to be kind of lazy, because it's not like Mr. Krabs really did anything to help Pearl. It's not like he said, alright SpongeBob, go spend a bunch of money to make Pearl happy. No, SpongeBob stupidly stumbles into making Pearl happy, and apparently that makes Mr. Krabs someone who actually cares about his daughter. Parties and presents aren't about the amount of money you spend, it's about how much time, effort, and care you put into them. They could have really done something sweet with this episode, like maybe Mr. Krabs realizes the error of his ways, and in order to try and make up for a bunch of bad birthdays he's given Pearl in the past, he goes to extreme lengths to make this party great. Or it could have kept with Mr. Krabs' character and made him cheap, but instead of having him spend almost no money, put him on a very strict budget and have him use his own ingenuity to try and create a great party while still not spending much money. Or this episode could have been about how he's a dorky dad. The dynamic of him being this stick-in-the-mud, embarrassing dad works in other episodes, like the slumber party. I think it would have been really interesting here. And that could have been the crux of the episode, how Pearl is embarrassed of him or something. But no, they'd rather go back to the well of Mr. Krabs is cheap and his only motivation is money. Which is sad too, because I feel like episodes that don't rely on that, like Grandpappy the Pirate and Shelvaman, tend to be pretty dang good. Now, do I still think this is the second worst episode of season 4? Probably not. It's probably not as bad as stuff like All That Glitters, or Wigstruck, or The Thing, because there are a few elements here that I do like. And though this episode kind of makes me feel a little sad and not like Mr. Krabs, at least it doesn't annoy me and infuriate me like others. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I make these lists of the bottom and top episodes of the season, it comes at the end of a long production cycle. I've seen these episodes quite a few times, and I'm not going to rewatch them all again just to figure out which are the top and the bottom. It really is more of a gut reaction than anything. So be sure to take them with a grain of salt. Pie Guy Rules, out.